what would you say to people that are going through that? How would you help them see a light at the end of the tunnel? Because that is a dark place to be.
It's very, very dark, and I mean, I don't really know how to say it, but just like, I always just had to keep thinking it has to get better. Press forward and hope there's a light. I didn't know there was one, honestly. Don't sit here and assume that this is it. Just hoping something would go right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, I want to talk about a part of my life with MS that was actually dark. I was unsure how I wanted to approach making this video because I never want to come across as being super negative or like I'm begging for pity, and I know many people in the disability community feel the same way. But I also feel like addressing this part of my life is so important because times like this are often hidden from everyone around us. The truth is, not only does MS impact your physical health, but your mental health as well. The MS community is incredibly supportive and welcoming, but because MS is completely different for every person that has it, it can be hard to find people with common symptoms and issues. And while I've met many amazing doctors and nurses throughout the years to help manage my symptoms, it's easy to start feeling like a guinea pig when you are battling a neurological disorder. The process to finding treatment is filled with endless lab tests, doctor's visits, and hospital admissions. And you never really know the solution to everything until that process has been completed. So, with no answers and not many people to relate to, it truly feels like you're wandering alone in the dark, not knowing what will happen to you next. And it can take a huge toll on your patience and your well being. In my last video, I discussed the point in my life when I became completely reliant on my wheelchair. But there were so many things that happened after that that led to my rock bottom. After being wheelchair bound for the first time ever, many other health issues started to arise. It's worth noting that at this point, I did not have an at home staff to help me out with my everyday necessities like I do now. Koala being able to help me full time is a fairly new thing, and for many years I had to have other people come in to help me, but there was never anyone at my disposal 24/7. So I did have Koala with me, but he was also working jobs with long hours to help make ends meet for us. So when he would leave for work in the mornings, I was often alone. I was also simply too stubborn to ask for help from him sometimes, and I was in denial, thinking that getting around the apartment on my own didn't have any risks. We were living in a small apartment that I loved, but even with a small space, getting around was incredibly difficult. Since I could no longer use my walker, I tried to use my wheelchair, but there was just not enough space to do so. So sadly, I had to resort to crawling from my bedroom to the living room on mornings when Koala was not home. While this did not present a huge problem at first, over time it would, so we started searching for a larger living arrangement. After looking for a while, we thought we found a place that was appropriate for my new normal. It had more square footage, was handicap accessible, or so it claimed. And the model apartment that we viewed was perfect. I could reach the countertops while in my wheelchair, the living room had a very open area, and there was even a small ramp at the doorway leading into the building. I was super excited to move in, and thankfully it did not take long before we received the approval phone call. However, upon moving in, we found it was not exactly what we were hoping for. The apartment that we got was smaller than the model apartment we had viewed, which presented a lot of accessibility problems. We were told the apartment size differed upon approval, but did not realize how inferior that would make the one we received. It was still larger than where we were living, so we went along with the plan to move anyway. I still was at a point where I did not have an at-home staff, so that crawl from my bedroom to the living room became much more debilitating. Instead of my bedroom being just around the corner from the living room, it was down a long hallway that was difficult to navigate. On top of all that, my wheelchair could barely fit into that hallway. Turns out, many places can claim handicap accessibility with only the bare minimum of requirements met. So even if I had someone get me into my chair in the morning, I could not use it to get down that part of the apartment. Since I was usually limited to crawling, this caused sores on my ankles and my knees. Once I made it to the living room, I was sometimes able to climb onto the couch and either stay there or transfer into my chair to use in the living room and the kitchen. But other times I would just sit on the ground out of pure exhaustion. Either way, sitting that long throughout the day poses some issues. As you may or may not know, sitting or laying down in one position for an extended amount of time puts you at high risk of developing pressure sores. Ideally, if you are wheelchair bound or bed bound, you should change position at least every 2 hours, either by yourself or by having someone assist you. Luckily, at this point I do not stay in bed all day, and I am able to move enough on the couch to relieve pressure. But at that point, I did not have the ability due to my injuries weakening me. And because of all this, I developed pressure sores on the back of my legs. After a long time of being in that apartment, we ended up relocating to a 3-bedroom trailer. This seemed like an amazing solution to my mobility needs, as I was able to access almost all the rooms with a chair. However, pressure sores are difficult to heal, especially when you're sitting all the time, and mine became increasingly worse, so I was placed on bed rest. And due to my declining health, I required daily visits from a visiting travel nurse. When I say residing in a hospital bed in my living room was awful, that doesn't even begin to describe the severity of how low I felt. It was truly one of the most dehumanizing experiences in my life. It felt like every day I was just going through the motions, waking up, surviving, sleeping, repeat. On top of that, the hospital bed my insurance approved for me was extremely low in quality. The idea behind the type of bed I received is to have alternating pressure within the mattress, so you do not develop new pressure sores, and to help relieve and heal the ones that you do have. The hospital quality level of these beds is amazing, but mine was only worth about $200 to $300. Despite this, I had no choice but to be stuck in it, and I stayed that way for 2 years straight. I didn't get out a lot during that time, aside from doctor's visits and hospital stays, due to surgeries or other procedures. I felt completely isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. I became extremely depressed and lost a lot of weight, even becoming malnourished to the point of needing intravenous nutrition at the hospital. It wasn't that I didn't have access to food, and it wasn't anyone's fault really. I just couldn't bring myself to prioritize my health because I simply didn't care enough to. The real turning point to everything was finding a wound care center that was able to help me. Throughout the years, I visited many centers, but one thing I've learned is that sometimes you need to change the course of action used to help heal wounds. When it seemed like my health kind of plateaued and there weren't any improvements, I asked for a new treatment. And if the center wasn't willing to do so, it was time to move on to someone that would. It was at that point that I learned how important it is to be your own fiercest advocate. Because if you don't push for change with your own health, no one will. Finally, I found a doctor that had the same ideals as me and was willing to change treatments as often as I needed to. I went from having several really severe wounds to only a couple small ones. Right after that, my hospital bed actually broke down completely. When I called the company to ask for a tech to come look at it, I was told that because I had been renting it through insurance for over a year that it was technically mine, and I would have to find someone and pay out of pocket to have it repaired. As soon as I heard that, I contacted a local waste company and had it hauled away. I started using a regular bed, and the wounds I had slowly started to close. We ended up relocating to another apartment that was actually pretty great for a while. Koala and I started going to the gym together, and the remaining wounds healed quickly. Now, obviously, this is not recommended to everyone if you are very ill, but in my case, it worked. And that point in my life actually ended about the same time that we moved into our current home. I am extremely grateful for where we live now, because I have gained so much independence with the ability to access every room while in my chair. And I have learned to view items like my electric wheelchair and other accessibility tools as a way to live my life as independently as possible, instead of feeling ashamed for using them in the first place. And to anyone out there going through a similar situation, where it seems like there is no good outcome, I would say to keep telling yourself to push one more day. That was the only thing that got me through every terrible part of those 2 years. I don't know what would have happened to me if I didn't push myself to have that strength. I know that this video had a more morbid tone to it than my last one, but the idea that we need to be silent about these hardships is entirely wrong in my opinion. Sometimes the best medicine is being able to open up to someone and learn that you are not alone. If you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully if you are in a dark place with your health or with anything else really, that you can find someone to relate to and who can keep you accountable to keep going. All you have to do is push one more day. I know it's cliche to say this, but if you can push yourself to keep going, things will get better.